Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another fantastic edition of Sitback with Shaq and Anu. It is a brand new week. It's a brand new month. It's the 1st of August 2022, and unfortunately, Anu cannot be here today. There's only one reason: he couldn't get fuel. So, ironies of ironies. We've got Minister Kanchana Wijesekara, of course, on the show with us again. Back on the show. It's wonderful to have you back on the show, Kanchana. Thank you so much.
Good to be back. Thank you.
Lots to talk about. And I remember on our first show, when you were with us, you said hopefully when you come back you have better news in terms of the current fuel crisis, and we've got a fair amount of good news that's actually going to be coming your way, and the stuff that's been implemented in the last 6 weeks or so since our first show with Kanchana. As always, we start off the show with our daily poll, and our poll is always focused on the subjects that we're talking about on the show. As you know, Sitback is talking about trending topics in Sri Lanka, and whatever is trending, whatever is making news, it could be political, it could be sports, it could be business, it could be innovations. We try and make sure we get those individuals in the studio. We had some fantastic guests in the past couple of weeks or so. Still have many more to go. Time for us to get into the poll. Let's find out what it is right now. Rightio, welcome back to the show, and of course our daily poll where everybody watching us right now on Channel One Dialog TV, and of course watching us on our YouTube platforms on PodHub. You can be a part of the poll, and this is your question for today. Will the QR code system reduce the fuel lines? Yes or no? Straight up with the minister in the studio. We're going to be asking this question for you because lots of questions based on the QR system is what we're going to be talking about. Will the QR code system reduce the fuel lines? Yes or no? You can WhatsApp your answer to 077 669 1590, 077 669 1590. Also, that is the number for you to send in your questions for the minister who's in the studio. So before we jump straight into the QR code system, which of course lots of good reviews so far on it, compared to where we were when we spoke 6 weeks ago, how are we right now in terms of the fuel situation, the procurement, and what do we have in our reserves?
No, it's still a little bit of a difficult task. It's a challenge. As I said the last time we met on the show, it all depends on the financial situation that we have in our country. And unfortunately, the financial situation is still the same. And we are actually looking into support from IMF and other development agencies. And with better restructuring, better fiscal policy, monetary policy, that's where we have to aim for. But unfortunately, this is what we have to deal with at least for the next 12 months.
Right.
That's why we did propose a system that where everyone actually gets a guaranteed quota. It's not going to be a 100% perfect system.
Right.
It's not going to be a system where everyone will get the complete requirement that they probably had or they want to have, but it's a way of just giving something. It's a way of managing the stocks that we have.
Right.
And right now what we are doing with our stocks is that we do distribute about 3,000 metric tons of petrol into the market daily, and about 4,000 metric tons of diesel into the market daily. But on average day, when we did not have these issues with financial issues, issues in importing fuel, we used to do about 5,500 metric tons of diesel. So there's about 1,500 we have to had reduced from the original or the previous amounts.
Right.
Petrol, of course, we had about 4,000 metric tons distributed. So we've reduced that to about 3,000. So we have identified certain areas that we need to give a priority. In terms of diesel, we do give a priority for public transportation.
Right.
All the CTB buses, the private buses, and the train services depend on diesel. And also school service buses and vans, office transport vans and buses, and also industries that transport maybe prime movers, heavy vehicles. These sort of transport vehicles, those are the ones that we have focused, given much priority. And also we are looking at ways whether we can accommodate other transport vehicles such as trishaws.
Right.
But it's very difficult to differentiate trishaws because
do we not know that?
we do understand certain requirements have to be fulfilled.
Right.
But when I looked at the records with the Department of Motor Vehicles, they had about close to about 11 million.
11 million trishaws?
11 million trishaws.
Wow.
Actually, sorry, 1.1 million.
Oh, okay.
1.1 million.
Right, okay.
Sorry, 1.1 million trishaws. Actually, bikes were much higher.
Right.
It was close to about 2.4 million.
Right.
Motorcycles, but 1.1 million trishaws. And in our system, we've managed to register about 800,000.
Yeah, I saw that.
By last night. I think the numbers have gone up a little bit today. But out of those 1.1 million, there are three kinds of categories. There are trishaws who do actually are used for private personal use. There are full-time trishaw drivers who do hires, and there are part-time drivers. So we have to differentiate them. So we are in the process of doing that. Not everyone is happy about it, but it's a system that we had to put in place. So we've asked every person who owns a trishaw if they are actually in the business of doing day-to-day hires to register with the closest police station that they do have and nominate a fuel station that they will be able to get their fuel from. So depending on the mileage that they do, we do have a plan maybe in the next couple of weeks to increase the quota depending on what sort of running they do in the transport services.
Right. Of course, I think our viewers actually have more questions this time than we do on the show. So by all means, please do send us your questions. I know for a fact that there are already quite a few questions that have already come in, and this is the best opportunity to actually get it directly from the horse's mouth, so to say, whatever the questions that you require. Now let's talk about the QR system, which I know you briefly mentioned at the show previously. You said that you want to look into a system where you can ration out fuel because of the crisis. Firstly, congratulations, over 5 million have actually registered in the QR system. Let's just get into the drawbacks initially of the QR, because of course it started off with lots of people questioning it. Why wasn't there a beta testing done before you actually rolled it out, Kanchana?
No, there was some testing done.
Okay.
But when you're looking at a larger scale operation, and the requirement was immediate.
Yeah.
And there were reasons that we had to just dive in and see whether it was technically sound.
Right.
I actually would like to say that all the development agencies, ICTA, and there were other companies that were involved, which doesn't want to even be recognized even at this point. There are leading companies in Sri Lanka, in the tech giants, telecommunication partners, and they were all part of this process, and they all did this free of charge.
Right.
It was not a cent that was spent by the government, CPC or anyone else.
So there's no money spent on the QR system?
No money at all.
Okay.
No money spent.
Right.
So we had a few meetings. They actually wanted to test it and run it, but the requirement is immediate.
Yeah.
So I was the one who suggested, let's just dive in.
Right.
And I know they were reluctant to do that.
Right.
Because they were just putting their brand name out there on the line as well.
Right.
So ICT took a bigger hit.
Right.
Diving in.
Right.
But of course they were ready to do it. So initially what they wanted to do was, actually this whole system was put up together in less than a week.
Okay.
in less than a week.
Okay.
And in any system, when you put up a system, it's research work, maybe years of research work,
Right.
or months of research work.
Right.
But they put up everything together in a week's time. We tested it out. First day of registration, we had a hard time of it.
I can imagine. It crashed.
It crashes. We basically were prepared for it.
Right.
But we did not know that people would just start registering immediately. But we had a window as well, because we were looking at a window where our next shipment was due, because there was a 3-week period that we didn't have any fuel at all in any of the Sipetco fuel stations.
Right.
Only the LIOC fuel stations were operational. So we wanted to have this system in place as soon as the first vessel was in Colombo.
Okay.
So I had a timeline for them. So they worked really hard on that timeline. So if any technical issues came out of it, it's completely my fault.
Okay.
I basically
It's
pushed
good
them.
to see a minister actually taking ownership of something that didn't go well, honestly.
No, I actually pushed them to do this. So they basically warned me this would be a disaster
Right.
first day itself, but I wanted them to dive in,
Right.
put the system in place, because one thing is, like, when you introduce something in, especially in Sri Lanka, like, people lose faith in it immediately.
Yeah.
So if you lose hype on the introduction,
Right.
this would have never been possible.
Right.
This would have been a reality. So I just gave them a timeline and said, okay, we need to start operating, because there's a lot of other stakeholders that you need to have on board as well.
Right.
Initially, even the fuel station owners were reluctant to do this.
Yeah.
They were having so many questions. How do we find smartphones, whether people will be able to register, how are we going to get our pumpers to use this machinery? They are not technically savvy.
Right.
And people will have other issues. And how are we going to manage people who ask for more quotas?
Right.
So there were so many questions.
Right.
But basically, once the system was agreed, what sort of system that we needed to do, basically I gave them a timeline and said, we actually wanted to start on the 25th of July. That was actually 24th of July.
Right.
So I set out the date as 24th of July.
Right.
And I told them, okay, let's announce and say 24th of July will be the first date of that will go national on the QR.
Right.
But I know that it's not going to happen.
Right. Right.
So at least from the 15th to the 24th, you have some sort of time to give people to adjust to it.
Right.
So I knew it was not going to happen. And they knew that as well. And I knew that I would be lying saying 24th it will go national.
Right.
So we wanted to get everyone registered by then.
Right.
So 24th onwards, we had a plan to go district by district, do the testing. Actually, everyone who was involved developing it wanted to just test one district.
Right.
They wanted to do not even Colombo. They want to do maybe northern province where there is only a few fuel stations available.
3 fuel stations.
So go with the smaller numbers,
Right.
or pick maybe 2 or 3 fuel stations from each district to do it.
Right.
So I told him, yes, let's do that.
Right.
But 23rd, I told him, let's go 24th. We'll go all the districts, we'll go into them. And they wanted support. And I had to mention there's a lot of volunteers.
Right.
Especially the Youth Corp, the Youth Services Council. They're volunteers, they're members. I receive messages daily, photographs, them going into fuel stations, registering, opening up their offices, doing that. There were so many banks that helped. There are so many other nanoseller, those sort of initiatives, organizations, every sort of movement,
Right.
Especially the youth.
Right.
They were engaged in this.
Right.
And they were going into rural areas to give their support. We didn't actually give them any sort of even data cards to them.
Okay.
Not a single cent was spent by the Ministry of Power and Energy,
Right.
or the CPC. Everything was done by voluntary.
Right.
Everyone volunteered. And with their support, we managed to actually, because initially the fuel station owners, some of them actually took this very well, adapted.
Right.
Some of them have gone an extra step,
Right.
and they have come up with their own solutions as well.
Nice.
Real-time fuel stocks to be displayed.
Right.
There's 2 fuel stations, I have to mention this, one in Gaul.
Okay.
It's just out of the exit of the highway, coming out of the exit. Aradhana fuel station.
Right.
Lahiru is the owner.
Right.
So young owner. So
actually, yeah, they have their own Facebook page, I
yes,
remember.
they have their own Facebook page. They have everything digitalized.
Right.
They have their own system. So everyone can monitor and say a 6,600 load coming in, what sort of use it has taken, so what sort of stocks remain. It's real-time stocks because all our fuel stations, even right now, are manually checked.
That's right.
But I wanted to convert them immediately, but it's a very large cost for certain people.
Right.
But these sort of new innovative things we can adapt to other stations as well.
Right.
And there's one more station in Kuliapitiya.
Okay.
So that also has adapted to the same system. So there's a few more that are doing well. And I had to say that adapting to this system, that almost every fuel station owner adapted in the northern province immediately.
Yeah, they had their own system going on before Colombo even started.
They did have their own systems.
Right.
And they adapted. They never made a fuss about it.
Right.
Never made a complaint about it. Didn't say that we can't find smartphones, we can't find people to handle these things.
Right.
Everyone basically adapted. And unfortunately, the western province was the most difficult to adapt. Colombo district was the most difficult.
And also the most complaints.
Most complaints, even up to now, we are receiving more complaints in the Colombo district.
Right.
It has to do something with the, I'm not just going to say fuel station owners, majority actually did adapt to it.
Right.
They had concerns. They said it might not work. People had, even I had questions mark on it. But I knew it had to be done. So there are still issues that we do face, certain requirements at how we are going to manage it. But I'm sure as any system,
you fix the bugs along the way.
Absolutely.
Right. Rukshan has a question. I know this question has actually come up a few times. Hello, Kanchana. This is a good progress, and we should amplify the effects in crushing the black market for fuel. Whilst the obvious culprits are the tuk-tuk mafia, rumor has it that the high-ranking officials of the police, CPC, and army are also part of this racket. Please elaborate on the plan to crush the black market for fuel, including the crooks in uniform. Rukshan De Silva, before you do answer this question, Kanchana, we actually have a video for you.
Yep.
Want to actually play this video, and we'll take the question and the answer right after this.
ගහන්න ගිය මගේ වාහනේ අංකෙට රෑ 10 මාරනකම් හිටියා තෙල් තියෙනවා සෙඩ් එකේ 10ට සෙඩ් එක වැහුවා පොලිසියෙන් ඇවිල්ලා සේරම ගහගෙන යනවා අපි පෝලිං වල ඉතින් ඒතර මේ මොන ක්‍රමයේ දැම්මත් මේක සාර්ථකද පොලිසිය ඇවිල්ලා ජීප් වලට ගහගෙන යනවා බූලි දාගෙන පුරවගෙන යනවා පොලිසියට මොනවටද බූලි වලට පොලිසියට ඕන නම් තෙල් ගහගන්න පොලිස් ගරාජයට ගියාම පස්සේ තෙල් ගහගන්න පුළුවන් මොනවටද මේ සෙඩ් වල ඇවිල්ලා පොලිසිය මේ වටක් කරගෙන පොලිසිය ගහගන්න මේ මිනිස්සු බයිනවා තියන්නේ ත්‍රිවිල් කාරෝ මේ සේරම තෙල් ඇද විකුණන එක ත්‍රිවිල් කාරෝ නේ තෙල් විකුණන්නේ පොලිසිය තෙල් විකුණන්නේ දැන් 119 ගාලා කෝල් මේ අපේ ගමේ මෙන්න මේ වගේ සිදුවීමක් කළා තියෙනවා කියලා පොලිසිය කියන්නේ අපිට එන්නේ ඉඳන්නේ නැහැ. ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ යාළුවන්ට ගෙනල්ලා ගහනවා, ගෙවල් වල වාහන වලට ගහනවා. ඒතර මේ මොන ක්‍රමයේ දැම්ම සාර්ථකයිද මේක? මේ සේරම අසාර්ථකයි.
Yeah, so pretty straight up complaints there.
No, I do understand there's a lot of complaints about police officers, other personnel getting involved in this market as well. But I don't agree that it's been done by everyone.
Right.
There is maybe a small portion of officers who are involved in it. And I had to say something as well. The police also doesn't have any other fuel stations to get their fuel requirements. There's just one fuel station for the entire police department, which is in Narayampeta. But rural areas doesn't have a fuel station specifically for the police department.
Okay.
But the Army, Air Force, Navy have their own fuel stations.
Right.
So they can manage the quantities that they require. But police officers also do require certain requirements weekly. The police stations have to run on generators as well.
Right.
So when there's power cuts, especially when there's a weapons armory in place, there is a safety protocol that you need to have power 24 hours. So
Right.
with these power cuts, they need to operate their generators as well. So they need these requirements. And most of the police officers do use their own personal bikes. And when you're working, say 8 or 10 hours a day, and for you to go and maybe spend another 2 days on a fuel line is not something that is practically possible. But we do have understood the requirements, so I think from the next 2-3 days onwards, we will be allocating some sort of quota from each fuel station, depending on the requirement that the police stations have. There's 436 police stations island-wide. So we have taken the entire requirement. For example, maybe it could be 200 liters from a 6,600 Bowser that we will first allocate it to the police.
Right.
Maybe 100 liters of petrol, 100 liters of diesel.
Right.
So then he can take it away.
Right.
And they can maybe share it with the other police officers, the requirements for their bikes, for their diesel generators.
Right.
So that is being looked at. But also, one way of curbing the black market, I know there could be so many laws and things that we could introduce. But one thing people should also, the public should also discourage them not to purchase fuel from black market. I know people, like even my close friends, have messaged me and said that we bought petrol for 2,000 rupees. Some say, okay, we go on trips, we collect, we get our fuel from this guy, we know a guy in the Trishaw Park, we know him, so we get for 3,000 rupees or 1,500 rupees, we give them some money, they stay in line, they collect fuel for us. So that should be discouraged. Because we never can assure the quality.
Right.
Once it leaves the fuel distribution dispenser, we can't assure the quality on that as well. So first thing to do is that we should, as public, should discourage purchasing from the black market. I do understand when there's a requirement, emergencies, it could be something that you're looking into.
Yeah, something, I mean, there's obviously more often than not, there could be a desperation.
Of course.
There's a requirement.
No, that's why we want to see that everyone gets a guaranteed quota. I'm sure that we won't be able to give everything that everyone wants, but the main idea behind this is to cut down the consumption at least about 40%. That's the number that we are looking at into the next 12 months with the central bank proceeds, especially that we've seen export proceeds increasing, but unfortunately those exports proceeds don't come to the central bank or the banking system. Else. Yeah, that's very unfortunate because if you can remember when the dollar was at 203 rupees, the real concern and the main questions from the exporters was that bring it up to about 230, so we will bring our dollars into the country.
Right.
Now it's at 367, and unfortunately some of these large companies are requesting to give a higher price on the dollar. So if they do genuinely bring in the dollars to the country, remittance money comes in, then we can make sure that the fuel supply is adequate and that we have a concrete plan to do that. So right now, unfortunately, the central bank has to go into hard regulations, maybe some curb on some of the importations, then look at the export proceeds. So we are looking at about a $300 million fuel bill for the next 12 months at least until we sustain. Our usual bill is about 550 to 600. So we have to cut that down to about 300, but that includes the power generation as well.
Right. So now, Kanchana, in terms of your, okay, just before I get into the question which I actually have for this whole black market mafia scenario going on, dear Minister, it says I could see certain similarities in you and Mr. Mangala Samaravira in terms of approach and thinking, especially related to suggested reforms for power and energy sector, the way you came up with a more practical and disruptive operational model and the way that you handle the resistance with confidence. Do you ever consider Mr. Mangala as an inspiration? Himarsha Abeysinga wants to know.
No, of course, there are so many people who have tried to do this. Of course, Mangala Samaravira represented the same district, was in parliament with the same time my father was in parliament.
Right.
Both of them contested together. Of course, I looked at how he had transformed the telecommunications sector. Sri Lanka Telecom, how it was transformed. But there are certain other politicians who have tried to do it.
Right.
I don't think the public backing was there to do that as well. You need the public backing, the government official backing, the political
You
leadership
didn't
backing.
have the public backing, but you basically steamrolled your way through. I think that is also something that people are talking about.
No, one thing you have to understand is now when I took this job, I knew it was going to be a difficult task. I'm going to get thrashed from everywhere.
Right.
And I'm probably going to be humiliated certain times. It's not going to be an easy job. First thing I thought to myself was, if I'm going to run this job, I'm not going to think about the future political career that I'm going to have.
Right.
If you think about how you're going to do in your future election, how you're going to maybe
garner more votes.
Garner more votes and keep the voters happy.
Right.
So I knew that I would have to take the unpopular decisions,
right.
Price revisions especially.
Yeah.
Because when I took office, I think the diesel and petrol prices were about 200 rupees below the cost.
Right.
So that was one thing I had to do. Had to do it in stages and then introduce a fuel pricing formula, and also everything to make it a competition.
Right.
Anyway, even before I got into politics, I always thought that some of the government institutes should at least not be public-private. It should be private enterprises.
Right.
Some should be public-private, but there are certain ones that should be private. I think CPC is better suited being a private enterprise so that they can compete.
Right.
Once you have the right guidelines, the laws to enact them, especially LIOC and CPC competing with each other, that would be the model.
Right.
So certain things were looked at that way, and I know that I was backed 100% by both the political leaders.
Which is good.
The former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa backed me 100% to do the reforms, and the current president as well. I remember even when I brought the electricity bill amendment, both the leaders were, don't take a step back, do it, this is time to do it. I thought it was an opportunity to do something as well. Always a crisis is an opportunity to do the right things as well. So I hope to continue that as long as I'm as the Minister of Power and Energy. Whatever reforms that can be done to speed things up, it might not give immediate results, but in the long run it will give results to the country.
We're also basically going to be talking about the whole CEB restructuring process. I think you received cabinet approval today for that one. We'll talk about that. The black market mafia that we're talking about, I know it's easy for you to basically state the fact that the public shouldn't buy it, but why didn't the ministry or the police actually crack down on this much more? Because it was a public secret, Kanchana. Everybody knew about it. I believe, honestly, the law enforcement or the ministry, or you could have done a bit more to actually crack them down than it was done.
Yes, certain things are not in the jurisdiction in our ministry.
Right, okay.
We are in the, our guidelines are basically to import fuel and to distribute it. So whatever happens after that is a different law that comes into place. We can make guidelines, but it's not a law that we can say this is what needs to happen. But we've been pushing certain things, but of course I do understand certain black markets could have been prevented from the beginning.
Yeah, it could have.
But unfortunately, with the political instability, a lot of government officials reluctant to go to fuel stations. I know personally I've called so many of my officials to say, please go to this fuel station, take some action on it. And I know that my officers were reluctant to go there. Because there were people who were in those fuel stations that were acting very aggressively. And even police officers were reluctant to go there. So to use force meant maybe sometimes you have to use a different kind of force. So that's not something that we want to do as a government as well, to go into a conflict. So once you start a conflict, if you can remember Ramukkan incident, where people prevented a truck going into another area. And unfortunately there was a death as well. Resulted in a death. And we didn't want that to escalate. And without flooding the market, without distribution in order, just going after people who had secured something was also something that was difficult to do. But now we have a system in place and we hope to keep the supplies going, stable supply going. I'm not going to say we can flood the market. The entire requirements will not be fulfilled, but we hope to distribute at least 3,000 metric tons of petrol, 4,000 metric tons of diesel daily into the market. So that weekly requirement we are planning to fulfill. So with that, we will do more to enforce the law on the black market.
Need to find out exactly what the law is. That is something that lots of people actually want to know. There's at least this QR system is creating some method to this madness at the moment. Commendable effort from you as a minister. Could you please clarify how you would tackle shed owners who hoard fuel to distribute it to other layers of the black market operation? Chanu Himasha wants to know.
Oh, no, that's one thing that it'll be easier with the QR system.
Right.
Because earlier when we did distribute to fuel stations, we also had so many complaints coming in saying that they were withholding stocks. They were probably giving it to priority to other people as well.
Yes.
There was one incident in Rajagiri where there's got a complaint that 6,600 liters, only 3,000 was utilized to the public. 3,600 was kept for his own personal vehicle fleet.
Right.
So we had those complaints. In the QR system, it gives us the opportunity to individually monitor each fuel station as well.
Okay.
So when the transactions are being done, we can hold them accountable and say, for the amount that we have distributed, you have only dispensed only this amount of fuel liters on the QR code.
Right.
So we can make a track on things. So we can monitor. So if we do find irregularities, I'm sure maybe 10 or 15% would be a number that we can maybe ignore. But if there are significant numbers that have been misused, and if it has not been in the system, we have taken a policy decision. The only decision that we can take is we can't take legal action on them.
Right.
But the decision that we can take is to stop distributing fuel to that station.
Right.
And if things worsens, the other option would be to take over the fuel station.
Interesting. So basically, going back to what we were talking about earlier on, people, like we said, they openly, unfortunately, sell black market fuel. What is the offense that they're committing, and what is the punishment according to the law? Are you in any way in a position to say that?
No, not really, because I've seen that some of the people who were taken into courts were given out bail as well. I don't think there's a sentence for it.
Right.
But as a ministry, as a guideline, what we have done is people, repeated offenders, now we've introduced a phone line as well, a WhatsApp number,
right,
for people to share videos or photos of evidence of irregularities, illegal activities. So what we can do from our end is maybe share all that information with the police department for them to take whatever necessary action is needed.
Right.
But from our end, what we are hoping to do is that we will block the QR codes or the numbers of the repeated offenders, so that they will be not able to obtain fuel maybe for a month or
right,
2 months,
right,
or depending on the case, maybe longer than that.
Right. So we are 100% on QR codes now. There is no last digit, there is no token system, nothing except the QR code.
No, that's the guideline that we have given.
Okay.
And today there were complaints that some people tried to go without the QR code.
Right.
But today, fortunately, the public didn't allow that.
Good.
Even if the fuel station owners were prepared to do that, the public didn't allow that. I think only the public can put pressure on this.
Right.
They have to be vigilant about this.
Right.
Yes, of course, the QR code will be the only system that will be in place.
Right.
And unfortunately, I know that there are some other requirements that people have, generators, how are we going to obtain fuel for that, machinery, maybe some vehicles that cannot be registered. But for vehicles, of course, we have volunteers in each fuel station that will help them register. Generators and other machinery, we will have a mechanism in place maybe in about 4 or 5 days' time.
Okay.
Where we will have the divisional secretariat verify the details so that we can give a quota, or we have planned for door-to-door distributions as well for large-scale, maybe industries,
right,
machinery requirements to do that as well.
Now, what is the I know you said that you can actually monitor in terms of the sheds are concerned, but what is stopping an individual who's actually pumping fuel for QR code to pump more than their allocation? Is there anything that can actually stop them doing that?
No, unless if they really want to manipulate the system, there are so many ways to manipulate it. They can just do a full tank and say 20 liters were used, the quota. That's where we want to make sure that the back end is being monitored daily.
Right.
So we are getting reports daily on that. So based on those reports, if there's a significant difference between the number of users of QR, the number of liters that have been dispensed,
right,
that's when we have to take strict measures.
Right.
But could be for technical difficulties as well.
Right.
But I know that what I request the public is not to it can be easily manipulated giving money
Yeah.
to the pumpers or the fuel stations.
Yeah,
But
we've heard it being done. We've seen it being done. But then obviously the drawback really is going to be on that shed.
on that shed, and if we do find out that if that was done, the offense was committed by an individual, and that individual's QR code will be suspended as well.
Right.
That's the only thing that we can do from our ministry, because we can't take them to court.
Exactly, exactly.
And but we are on the lookout for that. So we will be enforcing this strictly.
Okay. How is the minister making rules on fuel sales by Twitter messages or press releases? Why can't the minister make these rules by publishing them as a regulation in the Gazette? Tisha wants to know.
It's a good question. Of course, Gazette notifications are like permanent ones.
Right.
So some certain guidelines we had before were temporary guidelines. So weekly guidelines depending on what sort of system that we had in place. Of course, once the QR system is fully functional, we know that everything is, the requirements have been fulfilled, that will be gazetted. So that will be the law that will be in place. Right now, what we are doing is to manage the existing quotas that we have. So that will be changing gazettes every week. So I don't want to be a person changing or the guidelines every week. So once the formalities have been done, once the developments are completed, that will probably take about 2 weeks. Then I hope to introduce the laws into the parliament as well, gazette it, and then we'll have a strict set of rules.
Excellent. In terms of, we got another question. We have got tons of questions, Kanchana. I might as well just get up and go, and these questions can pop up and you can answer them yourself. Sam says, first and foremost, kudos, Mr. Minister, for the reforms that's coming into place. And of course, the QR code fuel quota system. I believe the pumping and dumping will stop once people stop buying from them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So once everyone also, the public also start supporting the system.
Right.
But there's so much that we can do as an institute.
Right.
We can introduce new guidelines, we can introduce systems. Like I said before, it will not be 100% perfect system.
Right, right.
There'll be areas that they will have technical issues, people could manipulate it, but with the support of the public, of course we are looking at a perfect, to have a near perfect system.
Right.
So that support is very much needed.
Right, right. And of course, I think the thing is this, we're all in it together, in unfortunate situation together, so clearly we need everyone's support to make sure this works, because if it works, and when it works, it just eases everybody's problem. You don't have to practically have picnics and fuel lines anymore.
Yeah, I've been getting messages from a lot of people.
Good.
The last 2-3 weeks I've got messages threatening me as well.
Oh, really?
About certain things, requirements, their hardships and everything. But finally, just today, going through most of the messages, 99% of the messages were all positive messages. That the wait on the line has reduced, and some people have managed to get fuel after 4 weeks, some people have after 2 months, some people have got fuel without bribing anyone, some people have got into the fuel station and there were no people intimidating, no groups taking over the fuel stations. The police have done a good job. Fuel station owners have been cooperative. So there was so many positive news, and of course I know that certain people require additional quotas as well. But I think once a system is in place, we can see, depending on the requirements, how we can adjust it. But it will not be the entire 100% requirement that we won't be able to fulfill that.
Any system, when you obviously introduce, is going to be a lot of throwback on it, and clearly pushing through that system, which you have done along with your team. Joseph sends a message, a question: do you agree with the 5-litre quota for 3-wheelers is not enough? How can you sort that out, since we depend on them for hires?
No, initially what we thought was we'll just give them a number, because we had to look at the number of registered vehicles and the number of litres that we can dispense during a week. That's how we have come up with the number for the quota. So once we figure out, maybe after a week or two, once we study the patterns of usage, we might be able to increase a little bit of a quota. But of course, like I said before, we are not going to do that for the entire 1.1 million trishaws.
Right.
Because certain ones don't require maybe 5 liters or even 3 liters a week.
Right.
But of course, people who are hiring, and one is where now Uber and PickMe, companies like that, they have GPS systems.
Right.
Where they track the number of kilometers that they do, what sort of charges that they have. So we have some guidelines as well.
Right.
If they do have a taxi meter, if
Right.
they have the charges applied, the charges that the government has given them, not overcharging people.
Yeah.
And if they are actually running it, then we are looking at the option of giving them extra quota. But it will be addition to the system.
Right.
It will be ready in about a week's time.
Okay.
So where we will differentiate the taxis to the personal use trishaws.
Excellent. There's lots that actually been happening.
Actually, we are on the verge of giving PickMe as well their own consumer point.
Oh,
so they have
that's
about
great.
7,000 trishaws and bikes that they deliver and use for transportation. So that will be the first consumer point for petrol in Sri Lanka. And there's a second one, MAS is also being given one. Uber has requested for maybe 3 or 4 fuel stations to be allocated,
Right.
so that they get a priority. So we have given that approval as well.
So PickMe, basically, they have a consumer point, meaning all PickMe, all registered PickMe drivers
would be able to obtain the services
from there.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I understand they've got a place in Kohuwala.
Okay.
A closed down fuel station that they have leased it out.
Right.
So they've converted it. So it's going to be only for their full-time drivers.
Excellent, excellent. Good to hear. Rukshan De Silva says, I pity you for the slack you're getting, as us not being able to purchase fuel for the lack of USD is not your fault. But how the hell do you justify overtime expenses to the tune of 40 million rupees in a month that Sipetco had zero distribution?
I think I answered this question some time ago as well, last week when it came up. Actually, 40 million is a significant low number compared to the previous months. Previous months to January, February, March, April. Compared to that, it's a very significant low amount, 40 million. And to make it clear, we did not stop distribution. We did stop distribution to the fuel stations.
Right.
But the staff are still working 7 days of the week, distributing to essential services.
Right.
All the CTB depots, all the fishery harbors, airport aviation, ports authority, all the army camps, and electricity board,
Right.
Those sort of things, and industries. There
Right.
are dollar industries, there are rupee industries, there are export industries, tea industry, those sort of industries. So we do daily distributions apart from the fuel distribution to fuel stations.
Right.
Majority of our diesel goes into, out of the 4,000 metric tons daily, only 1,800 goes into the fuel stations.
Right.
2,200 goes into those essential services.
Right.
Ambulances, hospitals, generators, so we distribute that.
Yeah.
So our staff keeps working 7 days of the week. And the month that they did actually pay the overtime was, we don't pay overtime on that same month. We pay the month after that.
Okay.
So the calculations are done a month after, especially for the refinery.
Right.
So the refinery was in fully operational in the month of March and April, and in May. So refinery overtime is also added into that 40 million. I do believe we have to cut down on cost. 40 million is a significant low number of overtime from about 200 million that was paid 3 months ago.
Right.
But I still do believe we have to cut down on the number of workers. I've said this a lot of times, even to the CPC staff. If I had about 100 people working here, rather than 4,000, 100 good people,
work still would get done.
Yep,
All right.
absolutely. Maybe in an efficient way.
And in an efficient way. I wanted to basically also speak to you on the health sector, which is a very integral part. We want to get into that question right after this. We, the principals and the ADEs, don't like to fall in for fuel due to aggressive and aggressive atmosphere, I think, we experienced recently. Will education be considered essential service and supply us on special priority in the future? I think I dissected that question well enough. Will you pay the education sector in terms of special priority?
Of course, there is a special priority for the education sector. Unfortunately, there are so many sectors that we have to prioritize, and I don't believe that prioritizing each sector and giving them a separate date or separate allocation or separate fuel station will solve the issue.
Right.
So the main idea is to identify everyone's requirements and make sure that they have a easy way of obtaining it.
Right.
So with the QR system, I would see even the principals, the teachers and everyone in the education system will be able to obtain their full, and if there's any special circumstances, say examinations or paper markings or those sort of things, we have special programs for that. But unfortunately, only the emergency services, such as the health service, is given a priority on above everything else. But I do understand that there are priorities should be given to certain sectors. Education is one of them. That's why we have given a special allocation in the CTB depots for school vans, school buses, for them to refuel without any hassle 2 days of the week, given them the extra quota as well, so they don't have to just go with the 40-litre diesel or the 50-litre diesel weekly quota. They can get additional quotas at the CTB depots. But of course, if you are individually looking at principals and teachers, that's a large workforce. I don't think that's practically something that we can implement.
What's the story? What is happening with the medical services, which is clearly a priority? How do they work? Do they also work on a QR code system? Or?
No, they do. They do work on a QR code as well. Everyone works on the QR code.
Okay.
But the last 4 weeks, when we didn't have fuel distributed to the fuel stations, we identified about 95 fuel stations island-wide. So every Friday was the day that we allocated for the health services. They had a different allocated system. I had a meeting with the health officials yesterday as well.
Okay.
So they're happy to go with the QR system. And they have other requirements for generators for hospitals and for ambulances. Ambulances have been given absolute priority. They don't need a QR. They can visit any fuel station. They can obviously register QR. But they will be given a full tank or whatever requirement that they have for the ambulance, not to be collected into cans, but for the tank in the vehicle. So that will be given at any fuel station. Doctors have made a request, the health officials, on certain specialist doctors who will have to travel daily. So once those requirements are given to us, what we plan to do is we are going to give access to special categories so that they can request for additional quota depending on what they have to do, and based on that, from the system we can give them additional quota on that.
Do you have somebody at your CPC or at CPC rather working according to this? I mean, looking for, or are all the questions coming to you, Kanchana?
Majority comes to me. That's unfortunately one thing. But it's a good thing as well. So I'm also
aware of it,
and a lot of MPs, a lot of the politicians send in a lot, because they get most of their requests as well. So the government group, the cabinet ministers, everyone sends in different requirements, different requests. So we see how we can accommodate it as well. But of course, there are people on social media, whatever that has been posted, maybe on an urgent basis, maybe something that we can improve on, those are being considered as well. There's a lot of people who share posts.
Of course.
Even if I don't reply individually, I make it a point to read every, I'm not going to say every comment, but at least every post or every something that has been sent, emails, those sort of things. Of course, I would love to reply to it.
But you just don't have, clearly you don't have the time to do that.
But we do take into consideration,
Right. Awesome job managing the situation with limited resources. Do you have a strategy to facilitate fuel for IT freelancers who are bringing in dollars to the country? Ravindra Lakpriya.
Of course, now there are different sectors that have different requirements. That's why we have asked each industry or the ministry, the line ministry, to give us their requirements. Now, there were certain requirements that I didn't know until I got this system going. I never thought that bakeries needed diesel to run their ovens. kerosene needed to run their machinery. So
Right.
these were additional requirements that came about with this whole system coming into place. So we have given the responsibility for each ministry, each institution to look after their sectors, given their requirements. So we are working on that. We are trying to see how we can manage it. Of course, we will give a priority to the export industry. Whoever brings in dollars, if they can pay in dollars, much better for us. And we have facilitated that as well right now. Certain industries do pay in dollars, and we will have a system where, depending on the revenue that they generate for the industry, with the guidelines the central bank has given, to provide the necessary quantities to them. But of course, we have made it a priority, even if we can't give to personal use vehicles. Public transport, the 100% requirement what they have, we have given it. Whatever 100% requirement the industry has, we will try to fulfill that.
Right.
That has the other curb, what we will reduce is from the personal use vehicles.
Right, right, understood. Also today, you received a cabinet approval to restructure the CEB, which is something that has been actually, a thorn, so to say, for a long time. Here's the tweet from your cabinet approval was granted today to commence the restructuring of the Ceylon Electricity Board. A committee will be appointed to give their recommendation within a month from their appointment. The revised tariff rates for renewable energy projects were also approved. What does this mean?
Rates for renewable energies, rooftop solar, wind, other solar projects, all those tariffs had to be revised because with the interest rates going up and the dollar rate also changed from 203 to 367, people who had wanted to invest, was not getting any renewable rates that were feasible enough for them to complete their jobs. I do understand there is a backlog for payments for renewable energy projects as well.
Right.
From September, there are payments that we need to make. That would come into effect after the tariff revisions are done for the electricity board,
Right.
Which is being proposed as well. That will come into play in about 2 weeks' time. But these new rates will help new investors. Even if you want to put up a solar panel in your own house, this will help you. The CEB restructuring has been discussed for a long time.
Yes.
2002, there was a bill that was introduced. Unfortunately, not a lot of politicians agreed on it.
Right.
Trade unions are a massive force in the CEB.
For sure.
But this is the time to do it. Of course, we have to look at how we are going to restructure it. Initially, what I want to do is I'm going to appoint the committee tomorrow, 8-member or a 7-member committee, which they will give the feedback how we are going to do the restructuring in a month's time. So after the initial report is done, I'll introduce that to the Parliament. But initially, what I want to do is break it to 3 different segments.
Right.
Generation, transmission and supply should be 3 separate sectors.
Right.
Right now, everything together is making huge losses together.
Right.
If the generation is separated, they can make a profit. Transmission will be the one that will be difficult to make a profit.
Right.
We invest a lot of money.
Right.
Supply will definitely make some money out of it.
Right.
So once you separate the 3, and maybe regional wise,
Right.
if you need to break it to provinces, you can break it to that. So it will be better managed, better service. And even the power stations can be better managed with that.
What was your pushback for this? Are you expecting a pushback after this?
Of course, I'm expecting that.
Right.
There'll be a lot of resistance. But to be honest, a lot of even the CEB officials have wanted to do this for a long time.
Receptive to it.
Yeah, because there's a 26,000 workforce which is not necessary as well.
Right.
But made it clear to them we are not going to let go of people, but we are not going to recruit new people.
Right.
So, but the right people, the right jobs is always necessary. But now if you look at LECO is a government-owned subsidiary which is making a 3 billion profit every year.
Right.
So it's the same model that I want to adapt to the CEB as well. And we are looking at development agencies, maybe USAID, ADB, those sort of agencies, how to transform this, to get the assistance to do that. Look at how India has done it.
Right.
India did it, I think, about a decade ago,
Right.
or 2 decades ago, and they're making profits on power generation. It should not be a loss-making entity.
For sure.
And as long as the service is great.
Yeah.
People will pay the right price for it.
Because I remember, I mean, you've also opened out in terms of fuel for overseas fuel companies to come down. Would something similar work for power generation, or is it? I thought I read it somewhere. There's a threat to national security if something like that happens.
No, my personal opinion is that a service, people should have the choice for the service.
Exactly.
Which service provider that they go to.
Right.
Dialog, Telecom, Hutch, Celtel, whatever works for people.
Right.
They should go for that. So I think the same choice should be there for water.
Right.
Power.
Right.
Even at petroleum.
Right.
People should have that choice.
So it doesn't monopolize the whole thing that's going on.
Once that healthy competition is there, it will not be a monopoly that they overcharge as well.
Right.
Right. So you introduce a formula how you calculate it. So once you start doing business, I don't think people can overcharge you something for the service.
Yes.
So if you're not happy with the service, you go to next provider.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
So I think literal apps, I think should be more players in the market.
Right.
So that no one keeps you as a monopoly.
It's a refreshing thought, honestly, because this is not what we actually have experienced before. Everybody wants to just keep to one or two and start playing with those one or two, but it's great, Kanchana. Gihani sends a question. Appreciate very much your confidence, attitude, and the way of talking in the media with facts, figures, and reasonable justification. Is it possible to have a system to notify which stations receive fuel on a particular day at what time?
No, we can do that even now, but it was causing a little bit of a confusion amongst people.
Okay.
So once the system is in place, that will be also something that we will update. But I had to tell the public as well, now we don't distribute fuel to every fuel station every day.
Right.
That is not a practice that has been ever done in the Petroleum Corporation. Right. It cannot be practically done.
Right.
But usually whatever distribution that we have done, now if you take Colombo urban areas, maybe we do distribute daily, sometimes multiple times daily to certain fuel stations, but certain rural ones only get maybe about 3 or 4 days, once in 3 or 4 days.
Right.
But the fuel amounts are sufficient enough to take it for the next 3-4 days.
Right.
So that will come into effect with the QR system.
Right.
So once that comes into play, we will advertise where we distribute as well. But it all depends on the fuel station owner as well.
Right.
They have to put the money, they have to place the orders.
Right.
Even though we have a distribution plan, in the morning, once we check the system, if the money is not there, if the order is not placed, we won't be able to fulfill that order.
Right. Okay.
So those limitations are there.
Wonderful. We're into the final few minutes. I think we're just going to overrun for about maybe 5 or 10 minutes or so because there are so many questions. From this point onwards, Kanchana, I'm not going to ask you any question. Let's see. We're going to basically put up the questions that are coming up. We'll try and put up as many questions because there's so many that have come in, and this is a great opportunity to reach out to the minister, and the minister, of course, reaching out to the public at the same time, answering as much as we can. So let's see if we can actually have those questions up right now, which will also come up in just a few minutes. But don't forget, the poll is also running. We have a few more minutes before we are done with the poll. We've extensively spoken about the QR system. Jason says, any possibility to pay in USD and get petrol from a few sheds on a priority basis for tourists and those who have the ability to do it?
No, currently there is no system in place where you can pay any other foreign currency in Sri Lanka. That's not a practice that is regulated.
Right.
But we are hoping to introduce a system, I think that was approved in the cabinet today as well. We will try to give a fuel, maybe a tap and go card.
Okay.
Maybe the foreigners or whoever tourists, maybe even Sri Lankans who are living abroad who come on holiday.
Right.
They can purchase maybe a card that can be used as a fuel card,
right.
Which we will identify certain locations in Sri Lanka, maybe Sigiriya, maybe Yala, those sort of areas, so that we have a separate pump for that, so that they can have the adequate amount of fuel really.
Great.
Not just a limited quota, but whatever they pay in dollars, the required amounts, that we facilitate, because we have to support the tourism industry.
That's
and
right.
People don't come here just to be restricted into their own houses.
Right.
So that facility will be open. And there is another possibility that we are looking at, not to physically pay in dollars, but people who do have dollars, to have a dollar clients to maybe deposit money straight into the accounts and use a part of that money as a tap and go card as well.
Right.
So that we will not have specific locations for dollar customers
Right.
that will be discriminating.
That's right.
So we will have others coming in as well.
Right.
But maybe a priority, maybe a line where we give that opportunity for those sort of
It's
customers.
like the green channel, something
Sort of,
similar to that.
yeah.
Ishan, probably not your expert area, but what's your personal opinion on improving the train transportation? Is it going to be the most cost-effective method of transportation going forward, I suppose?
No, of course, that's one area that the government is looking to improve. It's one area that we have to improve. And first thing to improve that is, I think my personal opinion is, the railway department should be privatized as well. Open up for the private sector to come in,
Right.
to support that.
Right.
As long as it's with the government sector, I don't think any possibilities there to compete with anyone.
Yeah.
And of course, it's the least amount of cost in terms of diesel for us. We only distribute about 100 metric tons of diesel daily,
Right.
for all the train requirements.
Wow, and it carries the most amount of passengers.
100 metric tons a day.
Wow.
And I'm pretty sure we can even manage up to 300, 400, even 500 metric tons a day if the numbers are increased, if the facilities are better, if it is done in proper way. So that's one area that we have to invest heavily. But of course, there should be some price revisions as well on ticketing prices.
Right.
We're still going back into maybe a decade or 2 decades on the pricing revisions.
Right.
So those have to be done, but of course a priority.
Let me see. Deshan, we need young, knowledgeable ministers like this in the cabinet. Great job, Kanchana. I don't think that's a question.
I'm sure there is a lot more. There's multiple people who are capable of doing that. And I'm sure there are people who can do a better job than me as well.
Right.
I'm sure if they've given the opportunity, they can do that, yeah.
For sure. Deshan, thanks a lot for that message. And like I said, we've got so many questions that have actually been coming in. So we're into the last final 5 minutes of the show. And it was Mrs. ACM Sahil, Honorable Minister. It says farmers of Ampara district are facing various difficulties in getting their required fuel despite harvesting small-scale crops, so fuel should be prioritized with due time as per the requirement of the farmers.
No, that's a priority that we have given. So we are working with the district secretariats and the agriculture ministry on that, on the requirements that they have. Unfortunately, when we do send requirements that they have asked for, there have been instances where loads of people come in and take over whatever requirements
Right.
that we have allocated for these farmers. Now we are looking at a mechanism where we put them in maybe cans and barrels.
Right.
We seal them at the Colonnava terminal and send them directly into the rural agriculture officer.
Right.
So they know exactly where to dispense or distribute. So we want to not make the farmers come to the fuel stations, but take that directly into their paddy fields or their rural offices so that we can be distributed. So that's a mechanism we are working on.
All right, Dishan, this is going to be our last question. What is your plans for electric vehicles in Sri Lanka? We spoke about this, Kanchana, just before the show started. I think Minister Manusha has tweeted. I actually wanted you to explain that tweet to me because I didn't understand what it was. Just want to find out what came about. There was an approval given in the cabinet for electric vehicle permit or...
Yeah, because it's been discussed for a long time to issue a permit for people who work abroad and send remittances on a regular basis.
Right.
And
Sorry, Kanchana, let me just read this tweet out to our viewers if you didn't get it. Minister Manusha Nanakara tweeted this evening saying also the Minister of Power and Energy agreed to a proposal made by me to issue fuel passes for tourists, migrant workers and dual citizens who are willing to pay in USDs at the airport. No more queues for them. What does that mean?
No, that's the same thing that I spoke about before.
Right.
So that's the tap and go card that
Right.
we'll be issuing at the airports.
Right.
So that when they come in on a holiday or tourism or whatever thing, we give them the quota according to what they have purchased for.
Right,
So
right.
they'll be given a priority, not all fuel stations, but we'll identify certain fuel stations where it's capable to give a tap and go card.
Right.
But Manusha did also bring a proposal for electric vehicles. Now
Yes.
there is a proposal on vehicle permits.
Right.
So the famous vehicle permits are given to politicians.
Yeah.
Now this proposal is for people who work abroad, send remittances on time, and on a stable amount to issue them a permit to import an electric vehicle.
Right.
So, but I do understand that we need to develop the infrastructure for that as well.
Right.
Not just flooding the market with electric vehicles. And I'm speaking with the Sustainable Energy Authority and private stakeholders, because the government alone can't put up these facilities.
Yeah.
So if the private partners want to put up their own facilities, we will make sure that it is facilitated. We can give the guidelines, we can give the approvals. So it's better if we put it up maybe next to a fuel station if there's any space available, even the existing fuel station owners, those things should happen. So that's one area that we're looking into. So we want to get the private sector involved, developing the infrastructure so that we are ready for electric vehicles to take us forward.
Excellent. All right, I think we're almost done with the show. I mean, we can just go on because I can just, questions are just rolling in. I'm sure Kanchana has to, it's a busy day today. It's cabinet day today. Too many decisions basically had to be made. Just before we wind up with the show, I think it's time for us to get into the poll that we started off this show in the earlier on this show. Will the QR code system reduce the fuel lines? Yes or no? From all the messages and the questions you've obviously had, everyone has accepted the QR code system. WhatsApp your answer. Everyone who watched on Channel One Dialog TV and of course on our platforms on YouTube, on our platform 077-669-1590. This is the answer. 69% say QR code system will reduce the fuel lines.
That's also 69%, yeah.
See? Look at you catching that one pretty fast. That's also 69. 69%.
31% includes Anu as well, right?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. Anu is not very happy with you these days. Unfortunately, still couldn't get a hold of his fuel. But yeah, 69% clearly. Today is the first day that you rolled out 100% all over. And there's been a lot of great reviews so far coming in. But I'm sure there's lots of more work to be done on that one and tweak as you go along at the same time. But great initiative. And again, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank
It's
you.
been an
Thank you for
absolute pleasure for being a part of it and enlightening us as to exactly what the QR code system is all about. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being a part of the show. Thank you so much to the Minister taking time off late night, as always, being a part of the show, explaining exactly how the QR system works, what needs to be done, and like the Minister did say, it's very easy to manipulate the whole system, but it boils down to each and every one of us. Remember, we're all in it together, and I think we all need to work together to make sure that this process is streamlined and everyone follows it. So we'll be back with you once again tomorrow night at 9:30 right here with another great guest. Till then, have yourself a great night.